All right, moving on to the session which is most anticipated by everyone in this Cloud Devfest 2020, which is multi-platform app development with Flutter, with your truly. Giving you a simple introduction about myself. You can read on the event page about the different things that I've done, like working on the latest trends and technologies with active services and businesses, even during these difficult pandemic times, and which was never a hurdle for developers. Since the beginning, I've been part of communities, been passionately contributing for volunteer projects, for successful volunteer projects such as Hack ACM. I would like to highlight being the vice president of ACM NUST last tenure. I was having the privilege of hosting Pakistan's first SDG overnight hackathon in collaboration with many other partners and tech companies at the time. And today I will be focusing on the multi-platform app development. With multi-platform app, you tend to go towards the mobile application domain, which only includes iOS and Android in the major domains, but also Fuchsia OS and Symbian. But with multi-platform app development with Flutter, I am addressing all the mobile application platforms as well as the desktop application programs. Um, we'll move on. I'll share my presentation slides with you. All right. I think it's visible to everyone what I've just shared. So let's begin. Today, I'll be dealing with multi-platform application development with Google's latest framework, which is still in development and with many cool features with the name of Flutter. So it was made using three things in mind: beautiful apps, speed, and responsiveness, as well as developer productivity and building an open developer environment by keeping all the Flutter toolkits and code open source. So Flutter is Google's UI toolkit for building beautiful apps for mobile, app, web, and desktop from a single code base. All the widgets you use in your mobile apps are also reusable for your desktop apps. All the widgets that you use in your desktop apps can be converted to widgets in the mobile app. So we'll get to every detail as I'm progressing through these slides, as well as the practicals when I move there. Firstly, Flutter enables you to build beautiful apps. Flutter provides a rich palette of tools that gives you control over every pixel on this screen. Designers never again have to compromise on their vision. Remember how you build prototypes of designs or ideas that your app will have a shape of some form of scaffold that covers the screen, some animations in the transitions, some interactivity over the app on the top left corner, or for example, the nav bar or the bottom right corner. Everything that you plan is possible in this while designing and development using Flutter. So Flutter includes a full set of widgets that deliver pixel perfect experiences across devices, and it enables the ultimate realization of Google's own material design library as well as iOS's Cupertino library. All the widgets that you build using Flutter will be compiled according to the platform you're building them upon. If it's Android, they compile to your material widget library by Google. If it's iOS, they compile to your Cupertino library by iOS. Whether you're building a highly tailored branded experience or a native iPhone app, you'll find Flutter provides everything you need to build a beautiful award winning interface. Secondly, Flutter is fast. Oh boy, it's fast. It's powered to it's powered by the blazing speed Skia 2D graphics engine, which enables hardware accelerated graphics. From the start, Google has been architecting Flutter to be able to support glitch-free, jank-free graphics at the native speed of your display, which which raises the question in some people's minds that while there are many JavaScript native or Android native or iOS native libraries and frameworks out there, why they need to come to Flutter? Well, I'm sure you'll have a change of opinion after you've viewed my presentation and the details about the advantages and limitations of Flutter while it still is in development. Flutter code is compiled to your native machine code. The Flutter language, Flutter framework language that we use for Android is Dart, and Dart also compiles to C++ on desktop, on Swift or Objective C for iOS, and for other platforms, we still have Flutter support ongoing. Even Flutter for Web is in currently beta mode, which will be out with a separate interpreter for web languages once the development time has finished. All right. Thirdly, the productive part I mentioned before. How is Flutter productive? Well, Flutter helps you to become productive. Flutter introduces a revolutionary new capability for developers and designers to iterate on their apps in real time. What this means is basically when you see this GIF I've added here, one change in the text doesn't require you to rebuild the whole application. All you need to do is press Control S, like you save a normal document, or you can use either one of these buttons to hot restart or hot reload your app. Hot reload builds the changes in the libraries to refresh the screen with your new additions. Hot restart restarts the app, builds all the states and widgets from fresh, introducing you to all the different things that lead you to the changes you see in the app. We call stateful hot reload because every widget has a life cycle in the app. And when that life cycle is associated with a state, you can only change the state without having to change the whole app. Now, this terminology might confuse you, but don't run away yet. States, widgets are all interlinked, and you'll get to know each and everything as we move on. Stateful hot reload transforms the way you build an app, and developers who use it makes them up to 3 times more productive. Because building an app once requires you to run large amounts of codes. Believe me, the settings, the manifests, the permission libraries, and it's a whole lot of things. But imagine having to just change one line and click one button to see all of that refreshed on your screen in just a second or a split second. That's cool. And finally, everything on Flutter, including Flutter itself, is totally open source. So Flutter is currently, I believe, in version 1.2.4, included with Dart SDK 2.8.4. And every new update brings a whole lot of improvements and new things to try when you're going for development. So let's look at the stack of Flutter execution. Flutter moves the widgets that you build, rendering animations, gestures, navigations. So you have control over all of them. That is the part where Flutter framework itself has the authority. Then we move on to utilizing the views to build them in the Flutter engine that firstly interprets the Dart code that you use to write widgets, gestures, navigations, and all this stuff. And then it compiles the code to the platform specific runtimes like Skia, Dart runtime, Dart UI, C++, Swift, Objective C, and things that all platforms use for a faster, optimized build. Skia is as I mentioned earlier, hardware acceleration tool. It uses your GPU when available to boost your graphic rendering and performance. Any Dart code is always compiled to native code during compilation, so you don't have to worry about issues with using a third-party framework and then building to native code. All of that will run on your hardware, whether it's GPU on your desktop, whether it's ARM on your Android phone, or whether it's x86 Intel processors. All of that you can achieve with single code base using Flutter. And then we have the optimizations that Dart provides to Flutter. Dart in itself is a quite productive and quite an easy object-oriented language to build and practice upon. Half of Dart is what I say in my own terms, um, object oriented, and half of Dart is declarative. The declarative part is where you mention the properties of your widgets that will display on your screens, the animations, the linking of navigation between them. That's where Dart comes into play. It is all based on the inheritance module. The widgets inherit states. The widgets inherit the material or Cupertino designs, and the states inherit the widgets. And when you're building widgets, you code in a declarative fashion, mentioning what you need, and Flutter will make it for you. But with the normal object oriented approach, you will have been making classes and properties and methods which you can use all over the app. The stats of today says LinkedIn says Flutter is number one fastest growing skill among software engineers, and that's nothing to object, and that's definitely a fact. I mean, look at you guys. You're here for a Flutter session, and I mean, uh, I'm already excited. I mean, even though we're not even getting started to the fun part, and LinkedIn already says that it's the number one skill in demand, so you're in for a good thing. Flutter is used by millions of brands around the world with millions of users. One really good thing about Flutter, when it compiles to native code and paired with good backend services which are dynamic, it gives you the capability to never disturb your app time or runtime whenever you're adding new things. And that's one of the for me, one of the best features that I like about Flutter. Flutter is one of the top 15 GitHub repositories in the entire world. You can go check out the Flutter SDK and the Flutter repository on GitHub at any time right now. So my focus with the app is Flutter for multi-platform development, and by multi-platform, I will be focusing on apps since I myself as am a front-end app developer. Although I would encourage you all take a look at the desktop applications as well built on Flutter. They have the same code base and they have the same ideology in the code and the same approach to things when they are rendered on screen. But today I will be discussing Flutter's flexibility with iOS and Android, explaining you throughout the way, step by step. You can either follow me, or if it takes you time, you can either come back and view the stream and follow the steps in the way that I perform them. After having introduced Flutter to you, I'll start from the very basics and get you to building your first Flutter front end or back end app using this short tutorial, which will allow you to do so. So let me show you. All right, the first things first. Um, Whenever you're working on a framework, you need a good IDE. I recommend Android Studio to those people who have powerful systems. I have a decent system and I can run Android Studio and Android virtual machines. The plus point of Android Studio is the integration with version control like GitHub and the Android Virtual Devices Manager, which means that if you don't have your own phone to build and view the app upon, you can always use an Android virtual machine that Android Studio will build for you and build and compile your code on that phone, which you can debug the app on and later look at the release builds before proceeding with your final app. I'm currently using Windows, but I will still give some highlights and facts for those who are developing on Macs. So this is a view of a Flutter Android project in Android Studio. I will come to that part too. First things first, you have to install Android Studio. And as soon as you install Android Studio, you have the option of installing AVDs, Android Virtual Devices, to run your code on Android devices. If you're not uh, if you're not in possession of a decent system to run Android Studio, let me give you facts about how Android Studio works. So I'm running two VMs, uh, debugging my code and applications on both of them. And then I've got my phone attached to Android Studio. And while all of those three are running my app, 70% of my 24 GB RAM is being used. So if you can handle it, I would really recommend you go with Android Studio. But if you are in for a smaller or versatile and faster option for your code, which involves some time to set things up and deal with version control and co-editing, then I would suggest you go for Visual Studio Code. There are some basic shortcuts you need for Visual Studio Code that I'll be again showing you when creating new projects and building your first app. Again, these are just IDEs. You first need to install Flutter SDK as well. This is the install page for Windows. You can always download this Flutter Windows stable zip, save it to any folder where you can import this SDK from. Currently, I have it saved on my C drive under Flutter Tools, Source, and Flutter. This is SDK 1.7.1, I guess, which I was using to build applications using earlier dependencies. We now have Flutter Windows stable 1.22.2 version, which you can always look over the release logs to check which new things these new versions offer. So once all these things are installed, first step is to go ahead and open Android Studio. I'll come to Visual Studio after I'm done configuring Android Studio, because it's always, in my opinion, better to set up your Android virtual device with Android Studio first and then moving to Visual Studio Code. So here's my Android Studio. This screen pops up whenever I'm opening Android Studio. These are my existing projects I've been working on. So after opening up Android Studio, don't look at these options. These options will not be available for everyone. Like this start a new Flutter project is only available when you go to configure, go to plugins, and then when you search Flutter here, look, I have already got it installed here, and Flutter and Dart plugins. Dart will allow to lead your Dart code, and Flutter will allow you to create new Android Studio Flutter projects and enable Android Studio to work with the Flutter development tools. So first off, before creating any project, make sure these two plugins are up with your Android Studio IDE. And when you restart Android Studio, you will have this option, create a new or start a new Flutter project. I'll get, I don't recommend building from a repository like it's mentioned here, get from version control. I would recommend you start a new Flutter project, create a new dependency file, and then once you're done setting things up and you've ran your first build, then I would recommend you use Android Studio's version control GitHub plugin to synchronize your code with GitHub. All right, I clicked on the new Flutter package and then I went here. Make sure you've got Flutter application selected. Click on next. Then you get a project name. Let's say Devfest Flutter app. Only underscores and letters are allowed here, and numbers as well, but it's like a variable name. So keep that in mind. This name will be used on your debug builds as well. When you debug them to your phone and you have an app icon and an app label, this will be your app label unless you don't have it changed it in your Android manifest. We'll come to that again later. All right. Then you have to locate your SDK, Flutter SDK. I've already linked it here. But for those of you who just have installed Flutter, you can go and wherever you have your Flutter SDK saved, you click on the main Flutter folder, select OK, select your project location. This is the default project location for all your Android Studio projects. My username on this device is Omen, and then I have a folder there having all my Android Studio projects. I click on next, and this is your package name that will show up on Android details whenever you open your application details page on your phone, or when you view the manifests inside the app, Android Studio ID. If you're building for both iOS and Android, tick both these options. You have to include Kotlin for Android and Swift for iOS code, which allow Dart code to be compiled to native languages. Click on Finish. Here's a new Flutter project. We'll let it run, set all the files, and then I'll go through what initial files are set by Android Studio that are important when building your apps. It's a little bit slow because Android Studio is a heavy software and I've got multiple things running. All right, so it's here. The best recommended view, you have a list of views you can select from when you click over here. I would suggest you always remain on project view. When you open your module folder, you have these folders. If you're building on Android, this folder, it would be important to you when you're adding permissions, plugins, or making changes in the dependencies of the app. If you're on building for iOS, this folder will be important for you, where you look at this info.plist file, which is a list of permission files for list of permission strings for iOS, macOS, and Safari when you're building apps for the Apple platforms. When you're on Android, you go to this app source and then main folder. Over here, you have this document Android manifest.xml. Over here, you can always specify using tags which Android permission your app will be using when it launches. For example, you have an app for e-commerce. You'll be accessing media libraries, location, background location, always location. So all of those permissions or uh, API calls to the Android kernels, you have to mention here as tags. I'll give you an example of the tags that you can add here in another Android project after we're done looking at VS Code. I've showed you the info.plist as well. These are the two files. This is for Android, this is for iOS. And then this lib folder is where your Dart files or your screens or your widgets go. When you build your first Flutter project, this is the code that is added to your main Dart. Remember the material library. Oops. Yep. Remember that the material library are the Google widgets and the Cupertino library are the iOS widgets. So no matter what you import here while building your widget in the code, it always builds to the library that is suited to that platform. So for widget pages, you always have to include this line import package flutter slash material.dart. Alternatively, if you're only building an iOS exclusive app, then you could do the same as import package Flutter, and the Cupertino dot file. This will give you a list of all iOS widgets library that will compile the widgets that you write in iOS widgets. So here's how it goes. Again, our main function is what triggers the app. In our main function, we are running a material app. You can see here that our first widget, our root widget of the app is the material app widget. It's the root or node of the tree of widgets that's set as soon as your app launches. So whenever that root node is material app, you always use this function run app in your main function to link to the class for which returns the material app, and it starts executing your material app from then and there. So this material app first calls the my app class, which is a stateless widget. I'll explain to you the difference between stateful and stateless widgets in an example using this code, using the default code that Android IDE builds for you when you start Flutter. Your my app which stateless widget calls a material app, and material app is given a theme data. A theme data is where you can specify your theme for text throughout the app. For example, I'll show you one text theme, and in text theme, you can add the text styles. Remember, for every parameter and every object, Flutter library and docs and APIs always have an object-oriented approach to passing parameters, calling functions. So as you can see here, visual density, the property of theme data or material app, is also given a visual density object which contains constant for this parameter to go. This is the declarative part of Flutter, which I was talking to you about before. Then this material app calls its home page, which is the my home page, and then my home page extends a stateful widget. Whenever you make a stateful widget, this is the syntax. This was the syntax for a stateless widget. All your builds function. This function actually builds the widget for this class, widget build. So this you can include in the stateless widget body. But when you're building a stateful widget, you have to include a create state, which makes another state class that which builds the widget function. If you're lost here, I'll repeat it to you again. The widget build for stateless widgets, but for stateful widgets, you have to create another state class which has the widget build function that will rebuild as soon as you change the state. This state returns the state of the widget to this main class, and as soon as it detects a state change, it will rebuild on your phone's screen. When I run this on my virtual device, I'll let you know how this is going on in the background. So what our widget is actually building on the page is a scaffold. A scaffold is the default screen layout widget for every material app that we build. In a scaffold widget, you always have an app bar with a title. You always have a body with a list of children as its childs and children, and then you have a floating action button, or you can also specify the floating action button location with this new property that was added to Flutter recently. You could say floating action button location dot center docked. This will always make sure that your floating action button is at the bottom center of the page and always docked and not floating around the page like it usually does. So let's run this code and let me explain to you what stateless and stateful widgets are. If you don't have a device displaying here, there are two options. First of all, if you want to run it on a VM, you open this AVD manager, look for a VM. If you don't have a VM here, let me show you how to create a new one. You go to phone and you select the phone for which you want to build the app, or if you're keeping it similar to the other phones, then select the one that is most relevant to you. Whenever I'm building my projects, I always go for the Nexus 6 because it's the most universal phone I could go for. And then you click on next. You always select the latest Android API that's available. I already have it downloaded, or else you will have a download button appearing right next to the name. After going here, there's only one more important change here that you need to keep track of. If you have a graphics processing unit in your systems, then always go for graphics and hardware GLES. This will make sure that your VMs are running in hardware accelerated mode and that they don't lag when you're debugging your builds or executing them to your VMs. So I already have Nexus 6 installed. I'm just going to launch it from here. It gives me a message unable to locate ADB. ADB is a tool of Android debugging uh, uh, functions that allows you to restart your phone through uh, manual connections and something like that. It's not needed here. So if you find this message when you're debugging your app, you most probably won't need it and you can always ignore this. So this is our default material app widget that comes when as soon as you build a new Flutter project in your Android IDE. So the state changes that I was talking about here, first of all, let me link the layout of this page to the widget tree that you've built in the state of this widget. So first of all, you have a scaffold. The scaffold is this whole screen body. Then you have the app bar. This is the app bar. And the app bar contains the title text, which is Flutter demo homepage. We've already, the title text has already been set somewhere over here. Yeah, when calling homepage, yeah, over here. You can always change it. You can do sample Devfest app. And now, um, whenever I run the app, oh, I'm really sorry. I haven't run the build. This is an old build that has been showing. Let me run it to you first. So as soon as I click on the VM here and then I run, you will see these messages in your terminal saying you're compiling Gradle tasks. And Gradle basically is a properties Android build file which looks at all the given permissions to the app, all the dependencies it uses to um, build your widgets into the app, and it basically interprets your Dart code and then compiles it into native code based on your device. So this will take time. In the meanwhile, I can link this page to you to the widgets we've used here. The scaffold is the scaffold body of this whole screen. The app bar is this part, whose title we have already passed as a function to the text widget. Then the area beneath the app bar is the body, and we've said we only have a column. In that column, we have two widgets. This line is a text widget, and this line is a text widget. And we've centered the column on the page to show that since there are only two things, the alignment should be at the center. Now, there's this floating action button over here, and the function of the state change of this widget is whenever I click this floating action button, I get an increase in the number of the times I press this button. And that happens whenever I click this button. It calls a set state function of the stateless widget, which always rebuilds the app upon setting states. So I've built the new app now, and I'll show it from scratch with the hot reload and hot restart functions. Remember, I changed the floating action button location here, and it's always center docked, so it's right here. You can all have other options as well, like floating action button dot end docked, and that would push it to the last without being docked. Uh, so I click on the button that calls the set state function. It adds to the counter that is in the middle of the screen, and it rebuilds the app with a new number, which is 1. And you won't feel that change because that's the interactivity Flutter gives. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and things like that. So for every change I make over here, ideally, Flutter should rebuild the whole app, right? But that's not the case. Now let me show you where hot reload comes into play. Um, I am not liking the debug banner that shows over here, and I also don't like that the app bar title is left aligned. So let me change those two things. First, I'll go to my material app widget. It has a property which says debug show checked mode banner, and I'll set it to false to remove this banner here. And then I'll center align my title by going into the app bar widget and setting its property of center title to true. Now, when I've done these changes, it won't show up because Android needs to recompile the code, but that's where Dart and Flutter help you. All you need to do is press Control S and all the changes are done for you. Or if you don't have that setting done, you can always just click on this terminal button which says Flutter Hot Reload and it'll do the same for you. If you've done a huge number of changes on the same page, like I usually make my pages completely dynamic as much as I can with the minimum number of lines, then I preferably would click on the hot restart. That would reload your app without having to recompile all the code. So we've built our app again with the same page, but now as you can see, since we've restarted, we've lost the value of the counter and it has reset to 0. All right, that is the intro to Android Studio project using Flutter. Now let me show you the same steps with Visual Studio Code, how to get started in Visual Studio Code using Flutter. So I'll stop it here. I'll save my Android Studio files. I'll not close this yet because I still have to show you the version control plugins of Android Studio. And I'll close this virtual machine as well. So I'll minimize that. And first of all, you need to install Visual Studio Code over here. Once you've done that, I have it installed, so I'll open it up. The same case as it was for Android Studio. This is the welcome screen that you will get on your Visual Studio Code. First of all, you have to go to Plugins. This is the Plugins button. You have to search for Flutter plugin for Android Studio. Flutter plugin, I think, is included with the Dart plugin, I guess. Yep. So Dart plugin is the one you need to install for Visual Studio Code, and it'll give you all the different plugin capabilities you need to use in VS Code when coding in Flutter. So the first thing you do for Windows, it's Control Shift P. The shortcut for Mac, it's Command Shift P. This will open a new terminal for you to run a task in Visual Studio Code. Over here, you write Flutter, and you have all the different actions that Flutter plugin will perform for you. So we need to create a new project, and there the setting is. I just click on this new project, and I'll give it a name, Flutter Devfest app. Now they're asking you to uh, save the project in a location. You select this folder, Android Studio Projects. It will save the whole. Now in the background, when you've done this, it's running flutter.create terminal function using the Flutter SDK, which will include Swift code for iOS, Kotlin code for Android, and all the basic things that were done in the same Android Studio IDE will be done here, as you can see in the terminal. And the last thing that it does is gets all the dependencies that are mentioned in this pubspec file over here. All right, the same things over here. And now you will be asking that if I run Visual Studio Code, how can I Open my virtual machine for debugging. That's simple again. Control Shift V, Flutter, and over here you will have a select device. Over here you have these emulators that you've installed either using Android emulator or the Android website that provides you with the VMs. You just click on the VM that you want to prefer that debugs your build. This launches your VM, and again you have to wait for the VM to launch. Again, the VM is not an easy software to load. Once that's done, the Visual Studio will now be linked to the VM, and all you have to do is run your code. I'm going to skip this part because again it'll waste a little time, but the obvious result is the same thing that we saw on Android Studio will be happening here with the same terminal window, and the same thing. The Control S gives you the hot reload options, and the hot restart button is right here when you open your VM. So I'm going to close this all again, and I'm going back to Android Studio to show you how you can integrate GitHub or other version control to co- work in a group or whatever it is you do using your version control. So over here you go to VCS, you click on enable version control integration, you select Git, and then you are now linked to your Git repository. If this Git repository's location is where your folder was saved. Whenever you've made changes to your code, you can commit your code over here. These are all the different files that haven't been committed yet. You can always, if you've signed into Android Studio, you'll always have an email address over here that will show who has committed these files. So I'm going to select all of the unversioned files and then commit. Now, since we don't have GitHub still linked to this Android Studio project, we only have the option to commit here. Once you have GitHub included, then you'll also have the option to commit and push these files to the GitHub repository you've linked this project to. And that you can do by uh, import from version control and share project on GitHub. This will allow you to create a repository which has the same location as the project on your local device and will push all the code once you've committed it. So I'm going to end this tutorial here, and I'm going to move on to the other steps and other features that Flutter offers. I mentioned earlier that the Google material widgets that you write in Flutter are always compiled to the Android code, and these are the examples of the different material widgets that allow you to easily provide navigation and connection between widgets in your app without having to go through a hassle. First of all, you get the app bar, the bottom navigation bar, the drawer, the material app scaffold, and the all the bars are part of this scaffold widget, which basically builds over your screen and provides a background for all the other apps. And then we have different buttons, which you can assign different on pressed functions to. Then you have inputs and selections. For all these inputs and selections, you have custom widgets. I'll be moving to custom widgets right after I'm done here. And then the Cupertino library is where the iOS style widgets are built over here. You can see the iOS style action sheet, alert dialogues. Alert dialogues have their own custom strings, which you either can mention in the info.plist file, which I showed you before, or you can have your own custom message and keep the info.plist strings empty. These are all the different iOS widgets. Now, the one thing I love for you all to see is this simple Flutter widget home, pub.dev. Whatever you seek as whatever widget you seek as giving your app the perfect functionality is somewhat included in this open source library of widgets. Say, for example, um, I want to check if my app, during using my app, I am connected to the internet or not. So I recently found out a perfect plugin or widget plugin to use for that, and that is the Flutter offline widget. All you have to do is wrap your uh, whatever your widget tree on that page is into a simple offline builder widget, that will check if your connectivity result is null, which means you're not connected to the internet either via Wi-Fi or via data. Then it will show an alternate message other than building your body message. Let's look at two or three others. I want to format my date time variables into text, which I can use all over the app. For that, you always have the datetime format library. I personally love this library. I've been using it a lot, and this makes you helps you keep your datetimes universal as one data object throughout your app without having to deal with strings, integers, and doubles. Another widget that I use a lot is the splash screen widget. I only have to mention the path of the logo that will load while your splash screen is running, and it'll always just give you a simple loader, and you can always navigate after number of seconds. Um, this is the two properties that you will write here that will allow your splash screen to move to another screen once a number of seconds are done. So say for example, I've mentioned 14 seconds, and after 14 seconds I want to navigate to my new home after the splash screen, which I've labeled the after splash, and the title is welcome to the splash screen, and the image that loads here is the logo or any other widget that you want to build that will be specified in the image property over here. These are some open source widgets people have made to easily integrate functions into the Flutter apps. You can always find more on GitHub. Not all of them are mentioned on pub.dev. As you can see, these are all sorted by relevance, and they're all having their own ratings and likes. So there might be some underdog packages that might be excluded when you're finding something on pubdev. So it's always good to do a Google search, look at Stack Overflow, look at pub.dev, look at GitHub results to find the perfect widget for you. And if there's no perfect widget for you, you can always go and build a custom class in Dart and build your own widget tree that you can use via a single call throughout the app. So I believe we're running out of time, and I'd like to conclude here. These were the basics of Flutter, and I hope I have the chance of discussing Flutter with you in the future. Here are links to a few code labs for Flutter that you can use. You can write your first Flutter app. I've already helped you do that. Add Google Maps using Google Maps API to Flutter app, build a photo sharing app, which involves a little backend operations, and then building beautiful user interfaces with Flutter, and Firebase for Flutter, which is, in my opinion, one of the best backends as a service that there is in the market. You can always reach me out. My tags are mentioned here: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. And if you're a gamer, you can reach me out in Discord, Origin, Steam, Epic Games, and Xbox. I'm an active gamer and I play a lot of recent games. One more thing I like to share before going away is before developing your apps, you'd like to design them with your group or yourself. So get Creative Cloud, get Adobe XD. This is my favorite tool to design widgets. I'll show you a sneak peek at the latest thing I've been working on. You can always get UI toolkits here. Uh, this is one of the examples of the designs I and my teammate we made for a project that we're building for our university. And this is a list of all the screens and the widgets on them. So here's a splash screen, here's a login page, here's a location page, and all the different properties that on a page we've. If you've built a prototype well, you can match your expectations, but it can also go the other way. If you've built a prototype well according to your expectation and you don't manage to do that in your code, so it has both these effects, and you need to be aware of what you can achieve via the design when you're coding. Another good feature that Adobe XD has introduced in its latest version, which is limited but good, is you can enable co-editing. This is me and my teammate. Only two of us can access this file, and we're only limited by that by XD. So co-editing is whenever I select something and move it around here, he opens this window and it will move around in his screen too. So that's real-time co-editing, and it's a great feature from Adobe XD. You can always work Adobe XD and prepare designs that you can achieve in the code. All right, I'm going to go back to I'll share these links to you in the description, and you can always reach me out. Here are my handles for you to note, and that's it for my session. I'll be taking questions now if you have any. AVM option in Android Studio is not available. Any suggestion on how to fix it? Mostly when you're first launching Android Studio, there are a ton of different difficulties when you're launching your VM. AVD Manager is usually disabled when your Gradle property settings or your Android Studio is not properly configured. My first advice to you would be to keep all your things updated, keep all your plugins well set, keep all your directories and all your path variables well set according to the SDKs and all the things you're using. You can run Flutter Doctor in your terminal to know whether your Flutter SDK has been working. After you've done that and it still not works, then you have to go to the Android Studio options and check if Android virtual devices are enabled or disabled. There's one setting which I don't believe is included in the newer Android Studio update, but it's still better than trying nothing. Or else you can find out the similar issues other people are facing and you can take their reviews, what they say about Android Studio. Or you can just go and download an emulator yourself from the Android or Google support pages. Kindly email the slides so we can refer to them later. Sure, I'll be sharing these slides with you. Always be sure to check GDG Cloud Islamabad, the social pages. All the material will be available to you, and also YouTube stream will be available to you to come back to whenever you're in the mood. Thank you for the informative session. Always a pleasure. Flutter is one thing I'm always excited about, and I'll be giving more sessions in the future, either extending this or building upon the same knowledge. So always keep DSC, Developer Student Club, NUST, and GDG Cloud Islamabad social platforms checked so you can get updates on my Flutter sessions. How much do we have to know about any tech to start freelancing out of 10? Okay, by that question, I think you mean app development through freelancing. Now, Flutter is, as I showed you, it encourages developer productivity. It's not something that you can get offered when you're using native frameworks like React. Flutter tries to keep um, that stress and that challenges away from you by helping you build universal code for all your platforms. I'd say for me personally, it took me 2 days. I was a beginner at everything to a professional at everything in just 2 days. You can be that lucky, or you can just spend your time and in your comfort zone to study all these concepts and practice them. But to be honest with you, it doesn't take that much time if you have the passion and the spirit. Any backend language that is best for Flutter? My opinion, Firebase. Firebase as a backend service is the best to integrate with Flutter since Firebase gives you the advantage of inline backend coding. You can always just check for any snapshot updates using cloud Firebase databases. You can attach simple conditions to Flutter builders that will rebuild your state and widgets as soon as your backend updates. The Cloud Firestore, the Cloud Messages, the Cloud Push Notifications libraries for Flutter that Firebase offers are giving away generous amount of benefits for a limited area coverage. You can always be sure to check that out too. But even if you have uh, a backend that is independent of Flutter, that is either REST based or uh, server based, then you can always just use the different Flutter libraries for front and back end communication and attach builders to your code to build the apps as soon as there are changes in the backend. Or front end of Flutter is very dynamic. You can have all the things going on in one page using one Boolean variable that you can keep updating from your backend changes or from your own changes during the debugging of the app. Salman Iqbal has asked Flutter or React Native, what do you prefer? To be really honest with you, my opinion, I'm not sure if others share the same opinion, but I'd like to stay away as much as I can from native development and REST based APIs, just because I don't have the um, confidence for that. I think I can build them upon later when I try them. But as much as I've tried, I think this is more suited to me and it's easier for everyone to pick up and build what they're thinking. I feel limited when I'm using native frameworks and technologies, but I would really like you to try both of them first and then deciding what you have to do. But if you're asking my opinion, then I would honestly prefer Flutter for development, whether it's mobile apps or desktop apps. Any other questions? Stay tuned, of course. We'll have GDG Cloud Managers session, which will brief you about swags, badges, and more. We'll have Iram and Arshian back after I'm done here. Feels feels good to be the moderator and a session having in the same Devfest. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I've not bored any of you. If there aren't any more questions, which state management architecture is best? Um, I'm not really sure. I don't actually have an opinion on these because I've not tried them out really. State management, um, I've only tried that one time because I haven't actually got towards state management too much. I've only done um, linking front end with back end for service apps, service or product apps, and I've always tried to keep my code as similar as I can, the widget tree that I build using Flutter as similar as I can to my designs in XD. Flutter with MySQL Server. Yep, exactly. There are HTTP libraries. Over here, I'll show it to you again. As soon as you go to pub.dev, here is your HTTP library, which you can use for your REST-based APIs. Your MySQL libraries are here as well. There are other SQL user community libraries that you can always use to connect to your database services, and a ton of other features. If you ask me, if you just go and search here for what you need, you'll find everything you want. Um, any best resource to learn Flutter for Python developers? Python developers already have a good experience with modularity and object-oriented approach, as well as the declarative approach of code. So I'd really say if there's the Net Ninja. He has a series of 44 videos on YouTube. I'll share the link with you guys. That's the ultimate crash course you can have for Flutter in a series of everything you should know when you're starting with Flutter. That will give you the best kickstart you want when you're starting Flutter. I'll share the links here when I'm done with my session. But others asking the same questions, I will mention the link. The channel is the Net Ninja, and he has a series of 44 videos, each based on one concept or one widget of Flutter, and he links everything together in the perfect Kickstarter way you need. Always do remember to give your feedback to win swags from the GDG Cloud Islamabad. We had a swag campaign for you guys. Be sure to check that out too. Any other questions? I'm here to answer them. What would you suggest to choose between React Native and Flutter for a web developer who doesn't have any prior experience of mobile development? Having no prior experience of mobile development means you've not been introduced to REST APIs or native development, and that would be the perfect reason to go towards Flutter, because Flutter is a framework that will allow you to declaratively code your widget trees, and that would build to your apps without having to deal with native code and the send or get requests that you'll need to do with the REST API. So Flutter would be a great start for you if you don't have any prior experience of mobile development.